He held my hand cold, trembling, barely alive, and whispered, "Son, I need to tell you what really happened in the jungle." For 40 years, he never spoke about Vietnam, not once. And somehow, he chose his last night on earth to finally break the silence. Good evening, friends, and welcome back to Kitchen Table Talks. I'm your host, Pat Sajak. Tonight, we bring you a story that may sit heavy on your heart, especially if you've ever loved someone who carried a war inside them long after the fighting ended. This is a story about silence, about memory, and about the final night when truth can no longer stay buried. If stories like this resonate with you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Pull up a chair, settle in, and let's begin. February 11, 2021. From Michael Turner, 10 Westbrook Avenue, Cedar Springs, Ohio. To anyone who has ever watched their parent carry a burden too heavy to name, I'm writing this letter in the dead of winter, in the small wooden house my father and I lived in for most of my life. The wind outside slips through the cracks beneath the old kitchen door, the way time slips through a man's fingers. I'm sitting at the same kitchen table where my father once read the newspaper every morning, the same table where he drank black coffee without sugar, the same table where he took his final breath. If a man's life could be measured by what he never said, then my father's life was an ocean. My father was Robert Bobby Turner, born in Mutngin, drafted in Samui Bay, shipped to Vietnam in early Samui Tam, though he never told me the exact date. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he wanted to forget. Maybe remembering meant reliving. Growing up, I believed every dad had ghosts that walked silently beside them. I naively thought every father stared out the window for long stretches without blinking, or woke in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, or flinched at fireworks on the 4th of July. But as I got older, I learned that wasn't normal. It was him. He never displayed medals, never attended veteran gatherings, never told war stories the way other dads did. When people in town asked him about Vietnam, he would simply shrug and say, "That was a long time ago." I was his only son, yet I knew less about his youth than strangers who had seen him in grocery store aisles. I never heard him laugh about old friends, or talk about the boys in his platoon, or mention anyone he served with. The silence was complete, absolute, unbreakable. And silence, if it stays long enough, becomes a wall. He wasn't unkind, just absent. Not physically, he was always in the house, but emotionally. He lived in a room I never had the key to. He spoke to me, of course, about the car, about the weather, about the Cleveland Browns, but never about the things that actually mattered. Never about why he looked 10 years older than his age. Never about why he kept a light on in the hallway every night. Never about why he once sat in the basement for 4 straight hours after a helicopter flew over the house. My mother passed away when I was 14, a quiet illness that took her faster than we understood what was happening. After that, it was just me and him, two people who shared a roof but not much else. I moved to Chicago when I turned 20, chasing a life that felt bigger than Cedar Springs. Dad stayed behind, as if the town itself had grown roots into his bones. We spoke over the phone once a week, always sticking to safe topics. "Your truck's still running all right, cold winter this year. You catch the game on Sunday?" Never. "Are you happy, Dad? Do you still have nightmares? Do you miss Mom?" We never touched the locked door between us. Then came the phone call I had been subconsciously waiting for and dreading all at once. 4 months ago, Dad slipped and fell in the garage. A simple fall, one bad step, but with a 75-year-old man who carried decades of untreated back injuries from the war, nothing was simple. He fractured 2 ribs, bruised his spine, and hit his head hard enough to cause bleeding behind the skull. The doctors stabilized him, but they also told me something that felt like a punch to the gut. "He's very weak, Michael. He's been living with chronic pain for years." Pain he never reported. Of course he hadn't. Pain was his oldest companion. I drove back to Ohio that night, through harsh winter winds, arriving at the hospital just after visiting hours. The nurse let me in anyway. She whispered, "He's been asking for you," and guided me to his room. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. He looked smaller, fragile, like time had finally caught him and refused to let go. But the eyes were the same haunted, distant, full of storms I had never been allowed to touch. He smiled when he saw me, but it was the smile of a man who had saved his last bit of strength for this moment. "Hey, Mike," he whispered. I took his hand. It felt cold, almost weightless. "Dad, I'm here." He nodded, gripping my fingers with surprising force. "I need to talk to you." I froze. Because in 75 years of life and in all 37 years of mine, he had never said those words. "About Vietnam," he added, voice cracking. My heart stopped. He had spent 4 decades burying those memories so deep I thought he would die with them untouched. But that night, his last night, he decided it was finally time. "Son, I need to tell you what really happened." The room was dim except for a small lamp buzzing in the corner, throwing a weak orange glow over the white hospital sheets. Outside the window, snow drifted across the parking lot like ghosts looking for a home. Dad kept his hand locked around mine, as if letting go meant losing his last chance. He swallowed hard, gathering breath the way a man gathers courage. "I should have told you earlier," he whispered. I just could never find the words. I wanted to say, "It's okay, Dad," but something in his face told me nothing about this was okay. He closed his eyes, his brows tightening as though the memories themselves physically hurt. "I wasn't supposed to be in that village," he said. "None of us were. We were sent there because command believed something that turned out to be wrong. Dead wrong." His grip tightened around my fingers. "They said the village was harboring enemy soldiers. They said it was dangerous. But when we arrived," he paused, jaw trembling, "it wasn't soldiers, just families. Women, kids, old people." My heart thudded. I felt the world narrow around his words. "We were supposed to search the homes, check for weapons, standard procedure, but something went wrong, Mike. And once it started going wrong, it didn't stop." He opened his eyes slowly, staring not at me but through me, as if he were looking straight back into Mutngin Chin Cham Samwitam. "There was a boy," he whispered, "maybe 11, maybe 12. He stepped out of one of the huts too quickly, too sudden. He choked. And my buddy Thompson panicked, thought the boy had something in his hands. My breath caught. What happened, I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence told the story. He covered his face with his free hand and exhaled a sound that was not crying, but close somewhere between a sob and a wound. "I couldn't stop it," he whispered. "I couldn't stop any of it." I placed my hand on his arm, gently. "Dad, you were a kid. You were barely older than that boy." "That's the worst part," he said. "I was 19, old enough to know better. Old enough to remember every damn second for the rest of my life." He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, trembling. "We radioed for backup. Command told us to keep moving. Clear the area," they said. But Mike, there was nothing to clear, just people trying to live. His breath shook. I told myself it wasn't my fault. I told myself I was following orders. But every night, for 40 years, I've seen that boy's face when I close my eyes. I stared at him, stunned not just by the confession, but by the fact that he was finally letting it spill out into the world after decades of silence. "Dad, why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you talk to Mom?" His throat tightened. "Because I didn't want her to see me as a monster." "You weren't a monster," I said. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and his eyes were full of something I had never seen in him before. Not fear, not anger, not trauma, but regret. Deep, heavy, choking regret. "I yelled at you once," he whispered. "You were 8. You dropped a glass of orange juice on the floor. I shouted so loud you cried. My stomach twisted," I vaguely remembered, a blur of childhood fear, so small compared to what he carried. "That wasn't about you," he said. "It was about Vietnam. It was always about Vietnam." He turned his head toward the ceiling as if begging it for forgiveness. "I didn't know how to be your father with all that noise in my head." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You should have told me," I said. "I could have helped." He shook his head slowly. "No, you couldn't. I wouldn't let you." Snow tapped lightly against the windowsoff, brittle, like the sound of time running out. Dad took a deep breath, gathering whatever strength he had left. "I need you to promise me something, Mike." "What is it?" "Don't let the silence swallow you the way it swallowed me." I felt something break open inside me. "What do you mean?" You carry things too, he murmured. Not war, but life, disappointments, pain. You hold them the same way I did, quiet, tight, hidden. Don't do that. Don't let it ruin you. His voice was fading. You deserve more than a life spent in the dark. My eyes burned. Dad, you didn't ruin my life. He smiled weakly, but I ruined my own. He turned his head toward me, his breathing shallow. That's why I need you to hear the rest. I need to tell you what happened after the village. His hand trembled harder. And why I never forgave myself. I leaned closer, heart pounding. Dad, I'm here. His eyes glistened, pain swirling in them like old storms. It was the river, he whispered, the river that changed everything. He closed his eyes, and his voice dropped to barely a breath. That's where the darkness began. Dad's breathing grew shallow, like every inhale cost him a memory and every exhale cost him a piece of himself. I leaned in, afraid that if I moved even an inch farther away, something imported, something irretrievable would be lost between us. The river, he murmured again, as if the word itself carried 40 years of weight. It was brown, muddy, fast, faster than any of us expected. His eyes fluttered open, searching for mine. That's where we set up camp after the village. Command told us to wait for extraction. Said we'd be pulled out by nightfall. He shook his head slowly. But nightfall came, and nothing happened. A shiver crawled up my back. What do you mean? I asked softly. Dad stared past me at a memory only he could see. We waited in the brush for hours, he said. Mosquitoes everywhere. Humidity so thick it was hard to breathe. Then he paused. There were 4 of us. Me, Thompson Ramirez, and a kid named Ellis. He was 17. Mike, 17. He'd lied about his age to enlist. Dad closed his eyes in grief. He was still just a boy. The room felt colder. What happened to him? I whispered. Dad let out a hollow, trembling breath. When night finally came, we heard movement across the river. At first, we thought it was our guys. A pained expression crossed his face. It wasn't. His fingers dug into my palm. It happened fast. Too fast. Gunfire erupted from the trees across the water. We dove behind the rocks, firing back, but we couldn't see a damn thing. He clenched his jaw. Ellis panicked. He stood up for 1 second. 1. He swallowed, his voice breaking. That's all it took. I felt my chest tighten. Dad, I'm so sorry. He shook his head violently, anger no, self-hatred flickering through him. It should have been me, he said. I was closest. I should have grabbed him, pulled him down. But I froze, just like Thompson froze with that boy in the village. He lifted trembling fingers to his temples. That's the moment I became someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't want you or your mother to ever meet. He let out something like a sob, but quieter like crying was a luxury he no longer believed he deserved. We dragged Ellis behind a boulder, he whispered. But we knew, he wiped his face with the back of his shaking hand, we knew he wasn't getting back up. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. And then, he continued, the river started rising. Monsoon rains upstream. The water went from knee-deep to waist-deep in minutes. Our radio was soaked, useless. His lips quivered. We had to leave him there. A silence so sharp it hurt filled the room. He wasn't crying now. He was beyond crying, somewhere darker, somewhere more hollow. I told myself I'd come back for him, he whispered. But extraction came at dawn. They wouldn't let us stay. A shaky breath. They said it was too dangerous, that we'd lose more men. He looked at me with eyes full of decades of torment. Imagine that, Mike, walking away from a kid who died 2 feet from your boots. I felt tears slipping down my face before I realized I was crying. You didn't choose that, I said quietly. He let out a cracked, bitter laugh. Didn't I? I froze. I hesitated. And in war, hesitation kills. He turned his head away. I never wrote his mother, he confessed. I couldn't. The Army told her he died a hero. They didn't tell her he died calling for his mom. My breath hitched. The image burned into my mind. Dad, he shook his head again. No. I need you to hear this. I need to let it out before it takes me with it. He gripped the sheets, as if holding on to the last edge of something about to slip away. When I came home in Samuichin, your grandmother had made a big dinner. Turkey, mashed potatoes, the works. He swallowed painfully, and I couldn't eat. I couldn't even sit at the table. All I saw were empty chairs where Thompson should have been, where Ramirez should have been, where Ellis should have been. He turned toward the window, watching the snow fall. And then your mother took my hand. She said, "You're safe now, Bobby." A tear rolled down his face. But I wasn't. I never was. The war didn't end when I came home. It followed me. It followed me into the grocery store, into church, into our bedroom, into your childhood. He took a deep breath, shallow, fragile, and I let it swallow me whole. I squeezed his hand, feeling my own heart breaking. "You did your best, Dad." "No," he whispered. "I survived, that's all." The snow outside thickened, falling harder, faster, like the sky itself was grieving with him. After a long pause, he added quietly, "There's one more thing I need to tell you, something I've never said out loud." His voice dropped so low I could barely hear him. Something that happened on our last day before extraction. A coldness swept over me. "What happened?" I asked. He opened his eyes, and for the first time I saw pure fear in them. "I thought I saw Ellis again," he whispered. "Not his body. Him standing in the jungle, alive." My blood ran cold. "But he wasn't," Dad said. "He couldn't be." And that's when I realized. He squeezed my hand, trembling violently now. The war had crawled into my mind, and it was never going to leave. He looked at me with eyes full of decades of silence. "That's why I never told you, because I didn't want you to know your father was broken." I shook my head, tears falling freely. "You weren't broken, Dad. You were hurt." He gave me a sad, exhausted smile. "Maybe there's no difference." He coughed hard. His body jolted with the effort. Alarm rose in my chest. "Dad? Are you okay?" He didn't answer my question. Instead, he whispered, "There's still one last thing you need to hear, Mike, the hardest part." He took a shallow, rattling breath. "It's about the promise I made at that river and the promise I broke." He closed his eyes, and it's why I haven't slept in 40 years. Dad lay against the thin hospital pillow, his chest rising and falling unevenly, each breath sounding like it was scraping against something sharp inside him. I could see exhaustion pulling at his features, but there was something else, too, something urgent, something that refused to let go until he finished what he came here on his last night to say. He squeezed my hand again. "I need you to understand," he whispered. "What I'm about to tell you, I've carried it longer than I've carried anything else. Longer than the nightmares. Longer than the guilt. Longer than the silence." His eyes drifted toward the window. Snow had begun to pile against the glass, blurring the streetlights outside. It looked peaceful, but inside the room a storm was gathering. I moved my chair closer. "Dad, whatever it is, I'm here." His jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. "It's about the promise I made to Ellis," he said. My heart dropped. "I didn't know you made him a promise." "I never told anyone," he said. "Not even your mother." He took a shaky breath. The morning before the ambush, he sat beside me while we were cleaning our rifles. He asked me if I thought he'd make it home. Dad's voice cracked on the word home. He told me he had a little sister, 10 years old. Her name was Lily. He said she cried when he left. Said she begged him not to go. He rubbed his forehead with trembling fingers. He asked me, "If something happens to me, will you promise to tell her I thought about her every day?" A wave of cold washed over me. "And you said yes," I whispered. He nodded. He trusted me. Me, a 19-year-old kid who thought he was invincible, I told him I'd go see her myself. I promised I'd look after her family. His voice sank. And then he died that night by the river, calling for his mother. Dad closed his eyes, and a tear slid down the side of his face. I didn't keep the promise, Mike. I never went. I never wrote. I never told his mother that her boy's last thoughts were of home. His voice broke completely. I was too ashamed, too scared. I couldn't face her, couldn't face any of it. So I did what cowards do. He swallowed hard. I ran from it. I shook my head. "You weren't a coward, then why didn't I go?" he rasped. "Why didn't I give that family the truth they deserved?" He looked at me like he needed me to absolve him, but I could not fully. Not honestly. Some wounds don't heal by pretending they're not wounds. "What happened wasn't your fault," I said softly. He let out a bitter laugh. That's what people say when they don't know the truth. I froze. I hesitated. I let fear guide me. And because of that, a boy died, and his family never knew he died thinking of them. His voice went quiet. That's the promise I broke. The pain in his eyes was like nothing I'd ever seen. Not in movies, not in stories. This wasn't a dramatic confession, it was the unraveling of a lifetime of grief. I carried that weight into everything, he said. Into my marriage, into fatherhood, into every moment of my life, he turned to me. You ever wonder why I never let you go on field trips? Why I always made you check in? Why I couldn't sleep if you were late? I nodded slowly. I thought you were just overprotective. I was terrified, he whispered. Terrified of losing another kid. Terrified of failing someone again. His fingers dug into mine. When your mother got sick, I thought God was punishing me. I thought I deserved it. I kept thinking about Ellis, about how I left him there, about how I never went back. His voice grew faint. That guilt ate at me from the inside. That's why I pushed you away, why I couldn't talk, why I couldn't be the father you needed. A lump formed in my throat. I thought you didn't want to talk, I said quietly. I didn't know how, he answered. You were growing up, becoming your own man, and I was still 19 inside, still stuck at that river, still hearing gunfire every time the house got too quiet. He wiped his face again, this time with both hands, as if he could erase the memories by sheer force. I tried to be better, he said. Every birthday, every Christmas, every school play, I wanted to be present. But some days, all I heard was that boy's voice. Some nights, I still saw him standing in the jungle, waiting for me to keep my promise. He looked at me, eyes wet, pleading. I didn't want you to see me as a broken man. I wanted you to see me as your father. I leaned forward, tears blurring my vision. You were my father, I said, even when you struggled. Even when you didn't know how to talk, you were still my dad. He shook his head weakly. I wasn't enough. You were what you could be, I whispered. And sometimes that's all a child can ask for. He inhaled shakily, as if my words were the first breath of relief he'd taken in decades. For a moment, the room felt still, almost peaceful. Then he whispered, There's something else. Fear prickled through me. What is it? I asked. He looked at the snow outside as if searching for courage in the falling white. I finally tried to find her, he said. Lily, Ellis's sister. My breath caught. What do you mean? It was 4 years ago, he said. I looked her up, drove all the way to Kentucky, to their old address. His voice trembled, but I was too late. My heart sank. What happened? He closed his eyes. She died before I got there. Cancer. And her mother, she passed 3 years before that. He let out a sound like a broken exhale. I never kept my promise, Mike. Not to the boy. Not to his family. Not to myself. Silence flooded the room, heavy and suffocating. After a long moment, he whispered, That's why I needed to tell you, because you're the only one left who can know the truth. I squeezed his hand. What do you want me to do? He looked at me with a fragile, fading kind of hope. Find what I couldn't, he said. Make peace where I failed. Tell his story so it doesn't die with me. His breathing trembled. Please, son, don't let me take this with me. I nodded through tears. I won't, I promise. His eyes softened. Thank you, he whispered, for listening. He turned his head, staring at the window again, the snow falling like memories returning from a long journey. There's still one more thing, he said after a momentous voice, barely a breath. The jungle didn't just take Ellis. He swallowed. It took something from me, too. He looked at me. And that's what I need to tell you next. For a long moment, I didn't speak. Neither did he. The only sound in the room was the faint beeping of the heart monitor and the wind scratching against the hospital window like something trying to get in. Dad looked so small under the thin blanket, so old, so worn like a man whose life had been pulled apart thread by thread. When he finally spoke again, his voice was a whisper rubbed raw. The jungle didn't just take Ellis, he said. It took everything else. I leaned in gently. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. He pressed his lips together as if deciding whether the truth would crush him or free him. It took the part of me that knew how to feel, he whispered. It took the part of me that could still be human. My chest tightened. He continued. After the ambush, after we left the river, my mind split. It was like I became two people. One of them survived, ate, walked, talked, came home. Married your mother, his voice trembled. The other stayed there. He lifted his eyes to mine, and the wrong one came back. I opened my mouth to protest, but he raised a trembling hand. No, you need to hear this without trying to fix it. I closed my mouth and nodded. He took a slow breath, gathering what strength he had left. Your mother God, Mike, she loved me more than I deserved. She tried to pull me out of it, pull me out of the dark, but I was stuck. I couldn't feel joy without guilt, couldn't feel peace without fear. Every good moment felt borrowed, and every quiet moment felt like a trap. His fingers trembled around mine. That's why I couldn't hold you when you cried as a baby, why I didn't know how to play with you, why I couldn't go to your little league games or listen to you talk about your friends. I wasn't inside my own body half the time. I was back there, always there. I swallowed hard. You were trying, I said. I was failing, he whispered. Failing both of you. He looked toward the hallway, as if expecting someone to come in and tell him it wasn't too late, but we both knew better. Your mother was strong, he said softly. Stronger than me, but I broke her heart more times than I can count. I didn't yell, I didn't hit. That wasn't my way. But silence, Mike's silence can break a marriage just as easily as violence. His eyes filled. I loved her. God, I loved her. But I loved her from behind a wall she could never climb. I felt a lump forming in my throat. When she got sick, he continued, I wanted to take care of her. I wanted to be different. But watching her fade, he shook his head. It felt like losing the only person who ever kept me tethered to this world. He wiped his cheek, and when she died, I lost whatever was left of me. His body trembled not from cold, but from finally saying the thing he had kept buried all these years. I wasn't a father to you, he said, not the way you needed me to be. You were, I insisted softly. Maybe not the way you wanted, maybe not perfectly, but you were there. He gave me a sad smile. Being in the room isn't the same as being present. He was right. I knew he was right. He took another breath, shallow and uneven. The truth is, I kept everyone at arm's length because I was terrified of losing another person I loved. I thought distance would protect me. I thought silence would keep me safe. He looked straight into my eyes. But all it did was make me lonely. Those words, simple, quiet, heavy, hit me harder than anything else he'd said. Loneliness. The kind that doesn't come from being alone, but from being unable to reach the world around you. He rested his head back against the pillow, exhausted. You know, he whispered, the night your mother died, I sat on the edge of the bed and realized I didn't know how to live without her. Not because I depended on her, but because she was the only person who ever saw the me behind the war. He closed his eyes, a single tear rolling out, and I was too broken to love her in the way she deserved. I squeezed his hand. She knew you loved her, I said. He gave the smallest nod. I hope so. Then after a beat, she deserved better. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The snow outside fell heavier, swirling under the streetlights like tiny white ashes. Finally, he exhaled shakily. There's a reason I'm telling you all this, he said softly. Not to bury you in my regrets, not to make you pity me. He squeezed my hand again, weaker this time. I'm telling you because I don't want the war to take anything more from our family. A pause. No more silence, no more distance, no more years wasted because a man is too scared to speak his heart. Emotion tightened my throat. Dad, I whispered. You need to live, Mike, he said, not halfway, not behind a wall, not afraid to love or be loved. He took a trembling breath. I want you to have what I couldn't reach, a life with connection, a life with warmth, a life without ghosts. He opened his eyes and looked at me with clarity clearer than I'd seen in decades. I need you to forgive me. The words hung in the air, fragile and devastating. I felt my chest cave in. There's nothing to forgive, I said. He shook his head weakly. There is, but even if you can't, I just needed you to hear me. My vision blurred. I hear you, I whispered. I hear all of it. He let out a long breath almost, a sigh of relief. Good, he murmured, because there's still one more truth, the hardest one. A chill moved through me. What truth? I asked. He looked at me, fear flickering in his eyes. The war didn't just take my peace, Mike. He swallowed. It took someone else. I stared at him. Who? His voice dropped to almost nothing. You won't believe me. Dad, I said, I need to know. His next words came out like a fragile confession. It took a friend, and I think he followed me home. For a moment, I thought I misheard him. A hospital room, dim lights, a frail old man on oxygen. This wasn't the place for ghost stories. This wasn't the time for hallucinations or riddles. But the way Dad said it, steady, terrified, absolutely certain, sent a cold shock through me. I tightened my grip on his hand. What do you mean he followed you home? Dad didn't look at me. His eyes drifted toward the doorway as if checking to see whether some door stood there listening. It started the week I got back, he whispered. Your grandmother picked me up at the airport. She cried the whole drive home. I didn't cry. Couldn't. I was still numb. He paused to catch a shallow breath. But that first night, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I frowned gently. Dad, you were exhausted. Jet lag. Trauma. That's normal. He shook his head, firm despite his weakening body. No, this wasn't exhaustion. I'd know the difference. These footsteps weren't mine, weren't Mom's, weren't Grandma's. I swallowed, unsure how deeply I wanted to follow him into this memory. What did you think it was? I asked. He finally looked at me. It was Ellis. The words hit the air like a dropped glass. My throat tightened. Dad, I know he was dead, he said. I'm not delusional. I saw him fall. I saw the blood. I saw the river take him. But the footsteps, they sounded just like him. Quick, hesitant, light. He used to move like that when he didn't want to wake us during nighttime watch. Dad's eyes locked onto mine. And then I heard his voice. A chill ran through me. His voice, I repeated. Yes, Dad said, the same voice, soft, nervous, like he wasn't sure he was supposed to be there. I felt my stomach twist. What did he say? Dad closed his eyes, and when he spoke again, his voice trembled. He said, You promised. The room went quiet. So quiet, the air itself felt fragile. And after that night, he continued, I heard him again and again. Every time I tried to sleep, every time the house got too quiet, every time I tried to live like none of it happened. He rubbed his forehead weakly. I thought it was PTSD. I hoped it was PTSD. But then things started moving. I tensed. Moving? He nodded. Small things at first. My boots turning up by the door even when I left them in the closet. My dog tags on my pillow instead of the drawer. Once his voice dropped. Once I found my field jacket laid out on the bed, the same way it looked the morning of the ambush. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It wasn't your mother, I asked. No, he said. Your mother never touched my old gear. She didn't want anything to do with the war. She wanted me to leave it behind. He let out a long, defeated breath, but it didn't leave me. Snow tapped lightly against the window soft, repetitive, eerily rhythmic. Dad looked toward the ceiling. It got worse after you were born. I blinked. Me? Yes, he whispered. When you were a baby, you'd sometimes stare at the doorway, the same doorway where I used to see movement out of the corner of my eye. A cold ripple crawled up my spine. You thought, it was him? I didn't know what to think. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was the pieces of my mind trying to force me to make things right. He hesitated. Or maybe it was Ellis reminding me I broke my promise. He closed his eyes. But I never told your mother. I was afraid she'd think I was unstable. He almost said crazy, but couldn't. So I kept everything inside, he continued. The footsteps, the voice, the jacket, the nightmares, all of it. I tried to bury it deep, but when your mother died, the house got too quiet again. His voice cracked, and I heard him, clear as day. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. What did he say, Dad? Dad looked at me with eyes filled with 40 years of fear. He said, Don't forget me. He trembled, and I didn't. I couldn't. Every time you laughed, every time you grew, every milestone, a part of me felt guilty that you got to live and he didn't. And every time I pushed you away, it was because I didn't want you to see the ghost I was living with. I felt tears slip down my face. Dad, you should have told someone. A therapist, a doctor, Mom, me. I didn't want to be locked up, he whispered. Back then, they didn't understand trauma. They just called it combat stress or said you were weak. I figured if I could just make it through life without hurting anyone, that would be enough. He let out a pained breath, but it wasn't. Silence eats you alive. He turned to me. And now, I don't know if Ellis was a ghost or a memory or a part of me that couldn't rest, but I know one thing. What's that? I whispered. He was waiting for someone to finish the story. His chest rose and fell unevenly, waiting for me to keep the promise I made on that river. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. And now you want me to be the one to keep it? He nodded. Yes. I need you to find whatever pieces of Ellis's story are left. His grave, his records, his town, maybe someone who knew him. He swallowed hard, because the dead don't really die, Mike. He looked into my eyes deep, aching, pleading. They only fade when the living forget them. The snow outside thickened, falling harder, faster, swirling like a white curtain closing around the hospital wing. Dad exhaled shakily. And there's something else. I looked at him, heart pounding. What else? His eyes softened, almost afraid of what he was about to say. You might not be the only one who needs to finish the story. I frowned. What do you mean? He reached for my hand again, desperate and weak. I think Ellis wants you to find him too. The room felt suddenly colder. Dad, I whispered. Are you saying? He nodded slowly. He's still waiting. Then his eyes fluttered shut, and the monitors around us beeped softly as his breathing grew shallow again. Outside, the snow kept falling thick and endless-like, a quiet reminder that some stories refuse to stay buried. Dad didn't open his eyes for nearly a minute. I sat there, his hand still in mine, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Each breath felt borrowed, as if the universe had loaned him just enough time to finish the truth he'd kept buried for 40 years. Outside, the snowstorm worsened, turning the parking lot into a blur of white. A nurse walked quietly past the room, glancing in with gentle concern, but she didn't enter. Maybe she sensed something sacred was happening in here, something fragile, something final. Dad's eyelids fluttered before he finally stirred. Mike, he whispered, don't be afraid. I swallowed. I'm not, I lied. He gave a weak smile. You always were a terrible liar. His breathing steadied a little, and then he opened his eyes just enough to look at me. What I told you about Ellis, about him following me, it wasn't meant to frighten you, he murmured. It was meant to prepare you. Prepare me for what? I asked softly. He looked around the dim room, the door, the window, the ceiling as if checking that we were alone. There's more, he whispered. I leaned closer. I'm here, Dad. He took a long, shaky breath. The first time I heard him after coming home, it wasn't just footsteps. A shiver rolled up my spine. What else did you hear? Dad's gaze drifted somewhere far beyond the hospital walls. I heard him say my name. Not angrily, not like blame. Just lost. Like a kid looking for his parents in a grocery store. He closed his eyes. The way he said Bobby, it broke something inside me. Something I've never repaired. I felt emotion rising in my throat. You were traumatized, Dad. Anyone would be. He shook his head weakly. It wasn't just trauma. His fingers curled slightly. It was a presence, a weight in the room. Like the air changed, thicker, colder, like when someone stands behind you in a dark hallway. I felt the hairs on my arms lift. And it didn't stop, he continued. Not for years. Sometimes he'd call my name when I was alone. Sometimes I'd feel a hand on my shoulder. Once, I swear I felt someone brush past me in the kitchen. My heart raced. Did Mom know? No, he said. I didn't want to drag her into that darkness. She deserved peace. A pause. I was afraid telling her would make it real. He took another fragile breath. Some nights, I'd sit in your doorway while you were sleeping just to convince myself the world hadn't followed me home. I looked down. I had faint childhood memories of waking up and seeing him sitting silently outside my bedroom, staring into nothing. At the time, I thought he was just checking on me. Now I knew better. Dad, I said quietly, this sounds like PTSD. Not, not a ghost. His eyes locked onto mine. You think I don't know that? You think I didn't pray every night? It was just in my head? He shook his head. No, Mike. I know the difference between memory and presence. His breathing turned shaky again. It wasn't just Ellis I carried, it was the silence too. Silence can become a living thing if you let it. It can take shape. It can watch you. He looked terrified for a moment, but then the fear softened. But that's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you because the day I tried to find Lily, something happened. My pulse quickened. What happened? He licked his dry lips. I drove to Kentucky, sat outside her house for 2 hours. Couldn't knock, couldn't move, just sat there like a coward. He swallowed hard, and then I heard it. Clear as you talking to me right now. He paused. Ellis said, go. Just one word, go. But it wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was pleading. I felt heat prick behind my eyes. So you left? Yes, he whispered. I drove away. I left the one chance to keep my promise, and that's something I've never forgiven myself for. Snow was piling high against the window now, the wind rattling slightly like restless fingers tapping the glass. Dad closed his eyes again. But here's the part I never told anyone. I leaned in, afraid to miss a single word. When you were 18, he said softly, you came home late from a party. You thought I was asleep. I nodded. I remember. He exhaled shakily. You walked past the hallway mirror, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw someone standing next to you. A chill slid through me. Me? I whispered. Yes. Who? Ellis. The room felt suddenly colder, as if the temperature dropped by 10 degrees. You didn't see anything, I managed. You were tired. You were grieving. He shook his head slowly. No. I know what I saw. And it wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was longing. Like he was relieved you were alive. My heart throbbed painfully in my chest. Dad, he raised a trembling hand. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because maybe he wasn't following me out of revenge. Maybe he wasn't stuck. He swallowed hard. Maybe he was waiting for someone who could finish the story, someone who could give him the closure I never could. I stared at him. You think he wants me to go looking for him? Yes, Dad whispered. Not because you owe him anything, but because I do. His voice softened to almost nothing, and you're the only one left who can carry the truth without being crushed by it. I wiped my eyes. Dad, I don't know where to start. He squeezed my hand, weak but determined. You start where I ended, he said, at the river, at that village, at the promise I couldn't keep. His chest rose and fell unsteadily. And you don't go alone. I frowned. What do you mean? He opened his eyes, one last time heavy, tired, and full of something that almost looked like peace. You go with him, he whispered. Before I could respond, the nurse entered softly, checking his vitals. Dad's hand slipped from mine, his breathing slow, fragile. But the last look he gave me before drifting into sleep burned itself into me. A look that said, this isn't just my story anymore, Mike. It's yours now, too. Dad drifted in and out of sleep for nearly an hour, his breath shallow and uneven, the heart monitor drawing jittery lines across the small screen. I stayed at his bedside, afraid to blink, afraid that if I looked away, something irreversible would happen. The snowstorm outside pressed against the windows, muffling everything in a thick white silence as if the world itself knew that his time was winding down. I watched his chest rise, fall, hesitate, rise again. Every movement felt like a negotiation with the universe. The nurse came in quietly, adjusting tubes and checking his pulse. She gave me a soft, understanding smile, the kind you give someone who's already half mourning. Then she left, closing the door with a gentle click. It was just the two of us again. Dad stirred, his eyelids fluttering. When he opened them, he stared at the ceiling first, as if gathering himself, then turned his head slowly toward me. You're still here, he whispered. Of course I'm here, I said. He nodded weakly. Good, because I need to tell you the rest before I go. Dad, I murmured, you don't have to rush anything. He gave a faint smile. Yes, I do. His hand trembled as he reached for mine again. Time doesn't wait, not even for regret. He swallowed with difficulty. Listen, what I told you about Ellis to presence, the footsteps, the voice, there's something even deeper I never spoke about. Something I buried so far inside myself that even saying the words feels like digging up bones. He took a sharp breath, painful, labored. I need you to promise you'll listen all the way through. I will. He nodded. Good. A long silence passed before he continued. The night before our platoon left the river, I wasn't supposed to be on watch. It was Ramirez's turn. But he'd been sick fever, chills, shaking so. I told him I'd take it. He stared past me into a dark memory. I sat there in the mud, rifle across my knees, listening to the jungle breathing. You've never heard anything like it, Mike. The jungle isn't quiet. It's alive. Everything moves. Everything hides. He exhaled slowly. And at some point I heard someone behind me. My pulse quickened. You thought it was the enemy? No, he said. I thought it was Ellis. I froze. He walked up behind me quiet, like always. He said, Bobby, soft, nervous, like he didn't want to startle me. Dad's voice shook. But when I turned around, he wasn't there. A hollow pause. That's when it started. My skin prickled. What started? The feeling, Dad whispered. The feeling that something was watching me from the trees. Something close, closer than breathing. He swallowed. And the worst part? I wasn't afraid. I stared at him. What do you mean? I felt comforted. Like whoever or whatever it was wasn't there to hurt me. A beat. Like they were keeping me company. A heavy silence filled the room. When I got home, he said, I thought that feeling would go away, but it followed me. Not just the footsteps or the voice, the presence. He took a shallow breath. I could feel him in the corner of rooms, in reflections that looked too tall, in cold spots in the hallway, in the way the house creaked at night. His eyes bore into mine. He wasn't angry, Dad whispered. He was lonely. A chill slid through me. Dad, are you saying he stayed because he needed you? Dad shook his head. No, he stayed because I needed him. The weight of those words hit me like a blow. I came home broken, he continued. I couldn't sleep, couldn't talk, couldn't live. Everyone expected me to be grateful to be alive, but all I felt was guilt. He lifted a trembling hand, and in that silence when I couldn't reach your mother, when I couldn't reach you, I felt him, like he was watching over me, keeping me alive, keeping me grounded. He closed his eyes. For years I thought I was losing my mind. But now, after all these years, I think he stayed because I never let him go. My throat tightened. You were grieving, I said softly. No, he whispered. I was clinging. I was holding on to him the way I couldn't hold on to my men, the way I couldn't hold on to your mother. He became the ghost of everything I failed to save. He stared at me intensely. That's why you saw something in the hallway that night. I stiffened. I don't remember seeing anything. You wouldn't, he said. You were half asleep. But I saw your expression. You froze, just for a moment, like someone walked past you. A shiver crawled up my spine. I didn't think anything of it then, he continued, but now I think he wasn't just following me. I think he was watching you too. Me? Why? Dad's eyes softened, filling with something strangely peaceful. Because he trusted me, he whispered, and I trusted you. Maybe he wanted to see the one good thing I brought into the world. His voice cracked. Maybe he wanted to know you lived. I felt tears well in my eyes. Dad, he squeezed my hand one last time, weak, fragile, but full of intention. I need you to let him go, Mike. I couldn't. The war locked something inside me that never opened again. But you have a chance to finish what I couldn't. My vision blurred. You want me to find his family? He nodded faintly. Yes. And tell them the truth, not the army's truth, his truth. He gasped softly, breath catching. Tell them he was brave. Tell them he mattered. Tell them he died thinking of home. His eyes glassed over with tears. And when you find him his grave, his name, whatever remains, tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I never forgot. I squeezed his hand, tears sliding down my face. I will, I whispered. I promise. He smiled small, tired, but real. That's good, he murmured, because my time is short now. His breathing grew ragged, irregular, but just before his eyes drifted closed again, he whispered one final sentence. And, Mike, he may come to you. Don't be afraid. It might just mean he's ready to rest. Then his hand loosened, slipping gently from mine, and the monitor beside him beeped softly, steadily, like a clock running out of hours. Outside, the snowstorm raged on white, endless, unbroken like a shroud being pulled across the world. Dad didn't die that night. Not yet. But something changed in the room after his eyes closed, something subtle, something weightless, like the last thread of a long-held secret slipping loose. The storm outside had quieted a little, though the wind still shook the windows in soft, hollow pulses. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and indifferent. I sat there watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest, the fragile rhythm of a man who'd carried too much for too long. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of failing him. His words, "He may come to you," kept circling my mind like a whisper stuck between worlds. I wasn't sure what to make of it, whether Dad meant a memory, a feeling, a dream, or something I wasn't ready to name. But whatever he meant, I understood one thing clearly. He believed it, deeply, fiercely, enough to carry the idea across 4 decades of silence. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing my eyes. They burned from exhaustion and from everything he had poured into me over the last few hours. I felt like two different people, one sitting in a hospital room, as any son would, and another standing alone on the bank of a muddy river in Mungin Chincham, staring across the water at a young soldier whose life ended before it ever really began. I didn't know him. I'd never seen his face, but I felt him now, a shape in the dark, a story left unfinished. A promise waiting to be kept. Around Bam the nurse returned. She moved quietly, checking Dad's charts, adjusting his blanket, smoothing the hair on his forehead with a gentleness that made my throat tighten. "You should try to rest," she whispered. I shook my head. "I'm okay." She gave me a soft, knowing smile. "No one is okay at a moment like this. But you'll need your strength later." I didn't ask what later meant. I already knew. After she left, the room seemed even quieter. I stood up and paced slowly, trying to shake the heaviness in my limbs. My reflection in the window startled me. I looked older, more hollow, as if hearing Dad's story had aged me in a matter of hours. When I returned to his bedside, his eyes were open again, though just barely. "Dad," I whispered. "You awake?" A faint nod. Don't leave yet," I murmured. "Please," he blinked slowly. "I'm right here." His voice was fading thin as tissue, trembling at the edges. "Dad," I said, "I need to ask you something." Another slow blink. "Why me? Why tell me all of this now?" His lips parted, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. But then he did quietly, painfully. "Because you're strong, Mike." I shook my head. "I'm not." "Yes," he whispered. "You are. Stronger than I ever was." His hand searched for mine. I took it. "You carry pain," he breathed, "but you don't bury it. You feel things. You let yourself love. You didn't let the world shut you down." He looked at me, really looked, with eyes that seemed clearer than they had been all night. "That's why I chose you," he whispered. "You're the one who can break the chain, the inheritance of silence, the generational weight of pain carried but never spoken, a legacy of ghosts, born not of the dead but of the living." I swallowed hard. "I don't know where to start," I said. "You start by going," he murmured. "Find his name, find his home, find the pieces left of him. I don't even know what he looked like." Dad gave a faint smile. "You will." I didn't know what he meant by that or if he meant anything literal at all, but I nodded anyway. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll go." He exhaled a long, shaky breath, as if some internal knot had finally loosened. "Good." A long pause. "Mike?" "Yeah?" "Dad? You forgive me?" My heart split. "Yes," I said through tears. "I do. I always have." His face softened not into a smile exactly, but into something like peace. A peace he had never worn in all the years I'd known him. He closed his eyes, and for a moment I thought he was drifting back into sleep. Then he spoke again, so quietly I almost missed it. Tell him, I'm not afraid anymore. I wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my shirt. I will, I said. You have my word. He inhaled shakily, exhaled, inhaled again. Then, in the smallest voice I had ever heard from him, stay until morning. I tightened my grip on his hand. I'm not going anywhere. He nodded, once barely visible, and let his eyes close. His breathing steadied for a moment, then slowed again. I sat in silence, watching him. Dawn wouldn't come for hours, but I felt the first hint of a faint change in the darkness, a softening of the hard edges inside the room. He slept, and I stayed awake, listening to the snow ease up outside, listening to the quiet hum of machines keeping time with his life, listening for any that might resemble footsteps in the hall. Not because I was afraid, but because, for the first time, I was ready, ready to carry the weight, ready to keep the promise, ready to face the story I inherited. And somewhere deep inside the silence of that hospital room, I felt it. A presence, soft, familiar. Not cold, not angry, just waiting. Morning never arrives suddenly in a hospital. It slips in quiet, like someone entering a room where a person is sleeping. The darkness lifts in slow shades of blue, melting into the pale white glow of fluorescent lights. And as the world outside softened, I felt something inside me shifting too. Dad's breathing had become shallow, but steadier than I expected. His chest rose and fell in small, fragile movements, like a candle flame stubbornly refusing to go out. The nurse came in just after Sal a.m. Her footsteps were soft, respectful, as if she understood that sound meant something different in this room. She checked his vitals, adjusted the blanket, then whispered to me, "He's peaceful, peaceful." A word I wasn't sure had ever belonged to him until now. I nodded, unable to speak. She left quietly, closing the door with that same gentle click that had come to feel like part of the rhythm of this long night. The snow had finally stopped. Outside the window, the world was washed in white clean, cold, untouched. It felt symbolic somehow, like nature was trying to give him a new beginning just as he was reaching his end. Dad stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. He looked at me with the soft, dazed confusion of someone suspended between two world-sown foot in the present, one foot in memory, and the rest drifting somewhere between. "Morning?" he whispered. "Yes," I said. "Morning." He nodded faintly, as if checking a final item off some private list. "You stayed," he murmured. "I told you I would." His lips curved in a weak smile, the kind of smile you give someone when you finally believe them. "That means more than you know." I swallowed hard, trying to hold myself together. "I'm here, Dad. I'm right here." He shifted slightly, as though gathering enough strength to say something important. "There's one last thing," he said. My breath caught. "Okay," I whispered. "Tell me." He stared at the ceiling for a moment, trying to find the words. "You remember when you moved to Chicago?" he asked. "Yeah. You told me you wanted to leave this town, leave this house, leave all of it. You said you felt like something was holding you back here." I nodded slowly. I remembered that conversation. I remembered thinking he didn't understand, but he had understood more than I realized. "Mike," he said softly, "I think what you felt wasn't the town. I think it was me." My chest tightened. "No, Dad, that's not—" He raised a trembling hand to stop me. "It's okay. I'm not offended. I'm just telling you the truth. You were carrying pieces of me without even knowing it." He exhaled shakily. "You felt the weight I never talked about. The silence, the guilt, the fear. Those things, they spill into the people you love, even when you try to hide them." I blinked away tears. "I didn't resent you," I whispered. "I never did." "I know," he said. "But you deserved a life bigger than mine." His breath quivered. "And now you have the chance to live it without carrying my shadows." I squeezed his hand gently. "I'll try," I said. He looked at me, his gaze suddenly sharp and clear, like a man surfacing from deep underwater. "No," he whispered. "Don't try. Do it." I nodded, unable to speak. He relaxed, his head sinking back into the pillow. A long silence, past gentle, heavy, honest. Then he said something I never expected to hear. Mike, I'm not afraid anymore. The words didn't sound like something he was telling me. They sounded like something he was telling himself. Good, I whispered. You don't have to be. Another pause. Do you? Do you hear it? He asked suddenly. I froze. Hear what? His eyes drifted toward the window, toward the soft morning light spilling across the floor. The river, he whispered. My heart dropped into my stomach. I hear it sometimes, he said. In my dreams, in my memories. It's always moving, always pulling. But right now, his voice softened to a fragile murmur. It sounds calm. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly. I think he's close. The room seemed to shrink around us. Who? I whispered, though I already knew. Dad opened his eyes again barely. Ellis, he said, I think he's been waiting for this. I felt a shiver run through me, but not from fear. It was something else, something solemn. Dad squeezed my hand one last time, weak. Light, like a fading pulse. Tell him, I'm ready. The monitor beeped softly, rhythm steady but slowing. I'll tell him, I whispered, though I didn't know how or when or in what form. I'll tell him everything. Dad's breathing steadied, then slowed again, deeper now like a man lying down after a long, exhausting journey. A faint smile touched his lips. Good, he whispered. That's good. His grip loosened. His eyes drifted toward the window one final time, as if expecting to see someone standing just beyond the falling flakes of snow. Then he whispered, Mike, you're free. Those were the last words he ever said to me. Moments later, his chest rose, fell, rose, fell, and didn't rise again. The monitor sounded a soft, continuous Tonia straight line that cut through the silence like the end of a sentence that had taken 40 years to write. I didn't cry, not right away. I sat there holding his hand, feeling the warmth fade slowly, waiting for something, anything to break the stillness. A knock on the door, a voice, a sign, but nothing came. Just the quiet, the same quiet he had lived with his entire life. And then, only then, in that perfect stillness, I felt the slightest brush of air behind me. A shift, a presence, not cold, not threatening, just there, waiting. The brush of air behind me was so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Hospitals always have drafts ventilation systems, doors opening and closing, the natural shifting of buildings. But this felt different, not cold, not startling, not even clearly physical. Just a tiny shift in the atmosphere, like someone stepping quietly into a room they already knew. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. Nothing was there. Just the dim glow of the hallway through the crack in the door. The empty blue chair in the corner, the white walls, the pale light from the rising sun filtering through the blinds. But the feeling remained. I couldn't explain it. I didn't try to. Grief changes the shape of the world. It sharpens some things, blurs others. It makes shadows look like memories and memories look like shadows. Still, I felt something. Not fear, not dread, just presence. A presence that felt patient, quiet, almost relieved. I turned back to Dad's body. His hand was still in mine, cooling now, the warmth fading like the last echo of a long, unfinished song. I squeezed it gently, not because I expected a response, but because I wasn't ready to let go. I kept my promise. I whispered to him. I stayed until morning. Outside, the snow-covered world glowed with early sunlight, glittering like a fresh sheet of paper. A beginning hiding inside an ending. A reminder that stories don't stop just because a voice goes quiet. A nurse entered softly, her expression gentle but knowing. When she saw the flat line on the monitor, she touched my shoulder. I'm so sorry, she said. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. Take your time, she said before slipping out again, closing the door with that same small click that now felt strangely final. I stood, my legs stiff after sitting all night, and walked toward the window. The parking lot below glistened with untouched snow. A few early commuters were scraping ice from their windshields, their lives moving forward with no idea of what had happened just a few floors above. Life never waits for grief. It just continues, indifferent. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass. "Dad," I murmured, "I'll do what you asked." I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I knew the promise had already taken root inside me. I felt another faint shift behind me, so gentle I almost missed it. A slight warmth pressed against my back, like someone standing just close enough to make their presence known. I didn't turn around. Some things don't have to be seen to be understood. And then, just as quickly as it came, the feeling faded, the silence returned, deep and consuming. But this silence felt different. It wasn't the silence that haunted my father heavy, suffocating, filled with unsaid words and unhealed wounds. This silence felt like release, like something long hidden had finally been spoken, like someone who had waited for decades had finally exhaled. I called the nurse again a few minutes later. She guided me through the protocol signatures, the steps, the slow collapse of a life into paperwork. When they took Dad's body, I followed them to the end of the hallway, watching until the gurney disappeared around a corner. I didn't cry until I was alone again. When I finally broke, I broke completely, hands pressed to my face, shoulders shaking, the sobs wrenching out of me like something that had been trapped inside for years. Not just grief for Dad, but grief for the man he could have been, the man he wanted to be, the man war had swallowed whole. I cried for the little boy he lost by that river, for the promise he couldn't keep, for the silence that had shaped our family like a shadow. I cried until there was nothing left, just breath and emptiness. Later that morning, after the sun had fully risen, I gathered Dad's belongings from the small cabinet. His wallet, his watch, a folded hospital gown, and a single envelope. My name was written on the front. The handwriting was shaky, slanted, but unmistakably his. I didn't open it, not yet. I tucked it carefully into my coat pocket, feeling its weight like a stone with a name carved into it. As I walked out of the hospital, the cold air hit me hard, waking me from the haze of the night. The sky was a pale winter blue. The world was calm again, washed clean by snow and sunlight. I reached my car, but didn't get in right away. I stood beside it, hands in my pockets, staring at the horizon. And that's when I heard it. A faint sound, almost nothing. Not wind, not footsteps, not a voice, just a small flicker of awareness. A presence. Like someone standing beside me in the quiet morning air. I didn't turn. I didn't speak. I didn't run. I just breathed. One deep, steady breath. Because for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I didn't know if it was grief playing tricks on me, or the weight of Dad's stories echoing through my senses, or something older, something tied to a boy who died by a river half a century ago. But whatever it was, it felt gentle, almost grateful. And then it faded slowly, softly, like the last trace of a dream. I opened my eyes. The world was still there, cold, bright, real. But something inside me had changed. Dad was gone, but the story wasn't. It was mine now. And somewhere out there, buried in a name I hadn't yet found, in a town I hadn't yet visited, in a grave I hadn't yet stood before, promise waited. A boy waited. A truth waited. And I knew with absolute certainty that I would follow the story wherever it led me, because the dead don't really die, not when someone is willing to carry their name. The road back to Cedar Springs was quiet, long, and lined with bare winter trees. Driving through the small Ohio towns felt different now, like each street, each light, each lonely gas station carried a story I had never bothered to read before. Or maybe I simply carried more story within me now, and everything around felt heavier because I was heavier. After I left the hospital, I didn't go straight home. I drove aimlessly, letting the miles unwind beneath me like a spool of thread unraveling. Grief has a strange way of making the world look like it's covered in a thin layer of frost-cold, muted, delicate. Somewhere en route muy bon, where the road bends and the cornfields stretch out endlessly, I pulled over. I don't know why. Maybe because the silence felt familiar. Or because the open sky reminded me of something Dad once said, "The world keeps going even when we don't." I stepped out of the car. The air was sharp and clean. The sun sat low above the horizon, thin and pale, like a weak promise of warmth. And then I remembered the envelope in my pocket, my father's final letter. I sat on the hood of the car, legs stretched out, and held the envelope in both hands. The handwriting uneven, slanted, shake looked like someone trying to make peace with time before it ran out. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. I unfolded it carefully, as if it might crumble like ash. Mike, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home this time. I'm sorry for that. I know you didn't ask for any of the weight I put on your shoulders, but you took it anyway. You were the only thing in my life that ever felt right. And I want you to know a few things before I go. First, I was proud of you every day, even on the days I couldn't say it, even on the days I couldn't look you in the eye because all I saw were the ghosts behind you. Second, I'm sorry I couldn't be the father you needed. War took things from me that I never got back. But you were the one good thing I managed to keep from getting lost. And last, don't stop living because of me. Don't drown in my memories. Don't let my ghosts become yours. The promise I couldn't keep doesn't have to be your burden, but if you choose to carry it, then carry it toward healing, not pain. Find him, Mike. Find his family, his name, his story. Tell the truth I never had the courage to tell. And when you do, let me go. Let the silence end with me. This is the only thing I can give you now, the chance to finish the story without fear. You deserved better than the father I was, but I hope you can still love the man I tried to be, Dad. By the time I finished reading, tears had blurred the words. I wiped them with my sleeve, careful not to smudge the ink. The letter felt like a confession, a blessing, and a farewell all at once. I folded it gently and held it against my chest. I love you, I whispered, words I had said too little while he was alive. The cold wind picked up, brushing against me like a passing hand. Soft, brief, familiar. For a moment I felt something settle inside me, a strange calm, like the quiet after a storm breaks open the sky. It took 2 weeks to plan the funeral. Veterans Affairs handled the military honors, a folded flag, a bugle, a few old soldiers in worn uniforms who stood straighter when they heard his name. I delivered the eulogy. My voice cracked only once when I said he had spent a lifetime fighting a war no one could see. As the service ended, I noticed something odd. A young man, maybe in his early 20s, stood alone beneath a bare oak tree. He wasn't dressed for a funeral suit, no tie, no coat, just jeans and a faded jacket. Too thin for the weather, too pale. Watching from a distance, when our eyes met, he nodded once, a small, respectful nod. Then he turned and walked away before I could approach. I don't know who he was, maybe just a stranger passing through the cemetery, maybe a reminder that life continues quietly around us. Or maybe I didn't let my mind finish the thought. The truth doesn't always need an explanation. Weeks passed. The house felt strange without Dad's muted footsteps, without his coughing in the morning, or the sound of his chair scraping the kitchen floor. I found myself sitting in his spot sometimes, staring out the window the way he used to, not searching for any, just listening, waiting maybe. But what I waited for, I couldn't say. One morning, when the frost finally melted and the air carried the faint smell of thawing earth, I packed a small bag, grabbed my keys, and locked the front door. I had a promise to keep. Ellis's records weren't easy to find. Military files never, or especially for someone who lied about his age. But I tracked him down eventually, piece by piece, thread by thread. A name on a roster, a faded photo in a county archive, a gravestone in a small cemetery outside Lexington, Kentucky. I stood in front of the stone for a long time. Private First Class Jacob Ellis Carter. 19.500, 11.968, beloved son and brother. Fresh flowers lay on the grave simple, white daisies. Someone still remembered him. I placed Dad's letter on the grass and pressed my hand against the cold stone. Your buddy kept you with him, I whispered, all the way to the end. He never forgot you. And he wanted me to tell you he's not afraid anymore. The wind rustled gently through the trees, and in that moment, in the quiet, in the stillness, in the soft shifting of leaves, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, closure. Not for Dad, not for Ellis, but for myself. The chain had finally broken. The silence had ended. Thank you, truly, for staying with us until the end of this story. Some episodes leave us smiling, some leave us thinking. But stories like the one you just heard, they leave something deeper, a quiet weight in the room, a reminder of the things we carry and the things we pass on without meaning to. Tonight we walked with a son through the final hours of his father's life, a man who returned from war with wounds no one could see and found peace only when he finally shared the truth he held for 40 years. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you love or someone you've lost, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Your words matter here. Your voice may help someone else who's carrying their own silence. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss the next conversation at our table. On behalf of all of us here at Kitchen Table Talks, thank you for listening with an open heart. I'm Pat Sajak. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. We'll see you next time.